Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everyone here, and I hope everyone's been having a good AWS reInvent so far. I'm Tanya Shastri. I lead product management for our next-gen firewall business at Palo Alto Networks. And I'm super excited to have Jesse Webb here with me today from Avalon Healthcare Solutions. And he's been a great partner to us as we've developed our Cloud next-gen firewall product. And I'm really happy to have Jesse share his insights. So we'll be tag teaming here for you today. My perspective a little bit more from the teams and the people who are working across the industry with several customers and what we're seeing and why we're developing what we're developing in our product. And Jesse with a very good perspective of how he's using the product and why. So with that, we will dive in. A quick run of the show so you know what topics we're going to be covering. We'll start a little. Jesse will share a little bit about Avalon Healthcare, their security strategy, and then we'll both talk about our journey with AWS and the investments we've made there. An interesting topic, hopefully very pertinent for all of you, is why next-gen firewalls. Can you hear me still? Okay. Why next-gen firewalls are needed in the public cloud. I'll use the Log4j attack and the anatomy of it to describe that. And likewise, Jesse will also share their experience with it. We need to be farther away from each other. I see. If we stand close to each other, it echoes. Reverb. Okay. I think they're saying if we stand close to each other, that's why the echoing comes. So we will keep our distance. The COVID protocols continue for different reasons. So I will share a little bit about our product, about the next-gen firewall, about Palo Alto Networks' approach for network security. And Jesse will share how they have used Cloud next-gen firewall and the outcomes they have seen for their environment. And we hope to have, I think we will, have several minutes at the end, maybe 10, 15 minutes for Q&A. So please pepper us with questions then. If you have some burning questions while we're presenting, we're happy to address them while we're presenting as well. All right, Jesse, over to you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Avalon Healthcare Solutions, the world's first lab insights company. We're a Francisco Partners private equity group startup from 2013. We were born in the cloud. Our end users are in Microsoft 365 and Azure AD, and our server entire compute is in AWS. So we've grew up in the cloud. We've been using it for 8 years, or actually 9 years now, and have gained quite a bit of experience. But probably what's most important and what we're going to share with you a little bit is the security journey for Avalon Healthcare Solutions. We had a rare career opportunity to build security in from the ground up, day one, and do it right in the cloud, take all the career experiences of breaches, performance, reliability, and take AWS and use all the best practices to build out this organization. But as you'll see in our story in a moment, it also adds some additional complexity. The other part of this journey with Avalon is to be working for a company that actually has a great mission for delivering improved healthcare and not save cost in the through the entire healthcare process and not just make money off of it. All right, so what is a lab insights company? So simply, what we've done is we have a clinical advisory board, and we have developed laboratory policies that we have automated to help define what the right test is. We collect the lab results from our providers. So we take that information to have the right data, the historical medical records. And with that, we've developed the right intelligence using machine learning, using our medical policies, clinical advisory board to develop an intelligence to help us deliver the right healthcare. And we can do this in an automated process. Over probably 95% of the claims that we process, we do in an automated fashion in on average about 300 milliseconds for multi-line claims. We consider lab science, medical science, to be our true north. We don't do any administrative policies. We'll only deal with things that have actually been tested and studied and are developed by our clinical advisory board. The policies that we have developed are now proven, because we've been running this since 2015 in production, to save our customers between 6 to 12%. So what does that actually mean? You think over 70% of medical encounters in the system start and end with a lab. So labs are involved in a significant number of the healthcare treatment process. To give you a simple example, because they've published this in a press release, a medium-sized health plan with over $1 billion a year in lab spend advertised that we saved them $112 million in 1 year, in 2020. And so that was about a 10% savings for that particular health plan. And one major part of this that's unaccounted for is the savings for the patients, the members that actually saved on their out-of-pocket and their copays. Now, I mentioned before the clinical advisory board. We have 140 policies that we've automated into the system. We have over 120 labs that participate in our network. So we bring to bear a lot of competition. And that's where we get a lot of the lab results from, is directly from the labs. And with 200 employees, we're really a small to medium-sized business that's having a large enterprise impact on the healthcare space. And again, as a small to medium-sized business, the last metric I'll point out on that slide is 40 million members. So we have to secure the patient healthcare records of 40 million members. And so as a small organization, that's a big responsibility, as you can imagine. So the security strategy. I'm going to be using terms that anyone that's been in IT, you guys know these strategies, but I'm going to walk you through them a little bit to talk about how we implement them and what they mean to Avalon. So the zero trust negative security model. We have hyper-segmented our environment. One of the big goals is to try and avoid shared fate failures. And if something gets a foothold, to make sure that there's not a lateral transfer in the environment. We've isolated our dev, our QA, our UAT, our production workloads. We isolate individual workloads into dedicated DMZs. Again, avoiding any possibility of lateral transfers. The zero trust side of it, we run a 3-tiered identity management system. The end users have their own identity where they surf the internet, get their email. Has nothing to do with our server-side environment. The server-side environment has its own identity management. And then the third level is our customers. Our customers actually come in via Okta and SSO. So all of our front door services, they have their own identity for consuming those services. Has nothing to do with our server side or our employee side. So that 3-level identity, very much a zero trust type structure to really limit, again, those shared fate failures of a compromised username or password. HIPAA minimum necessary rule. This came out of the HIPAA privacy law, and the concept of the minimum necessary really focused on data. So that data aspect of things where you shouldn't collect or retain more data than you need. Simple concept. But we've also taken that, as we were talking about with our design and our network, that minimum necessary. We don't want our workloads to talk to any system other than what they need to perform the function that they're designed for. So reducing the risk of lateral transfer, of a breach, and keeping it isolated into where it's literally only talking to what it's allowed, needs to talk to for that particular workflow. User access. I already described how we really minimize what the users can access and how we have segmented out the identity management to reduce the risk of compromise. Defense in depth. We assume a breach. We assume a 0-day attack. Log4j is a great example of that, right? So supply chain, we assume that there's going to be a 0-day or a flaw in our environment. I do spam phishing tests to my users. 4 to 9% of them click on the link, right? So if 4 to 9% of them are going to click on the link, right, well then I need to ask, okay, what's next? Well, where's it going to go? What is the risk? What is my defense in depth to stop that breach? And then the last part of it is building security into our culture. This is key. Leadership. If you have any leaders in the room, supporting your IT team, your security team, is really key to building this kind of strategy. It requires a little bit of extra diligence and patience. When you have a segmented environment like this, obviously nothing's going to work unless we say it works, and so almost any change in the environment has to be approved and structured within the environment. That requires leadership support. Another part of building it into the culture is we basically build it into almost the job descriptions. If I hire a Linux admin, I've put in his job description, and I call him a Linux security admin. 95% of his day job is administering the systems. Well, guess what? You're responsible for the patching, the performance, the reliability, the backup, the redundancy of that system. You know, you are a security engineer, and we need to make sure that the entire IT ecosystem sees themselves as part of the security team. Because if you don't build it in from the beginning, you've already lost. And then the other component is through the entire organization. We really promote security and compliance within the culture. We have integrated into our employees' handbook and their job descriptions. You see something, say something. You know, every employee is responsible for security. You know, protecting their passwords, protecting their access, protecting their laptops. You know, if they see something, to say something, both on the security side and the compliance side. Building that into your culture will make a difference.
All right, back to me. So I will say, Jesse, you know, great to hear from you, and kind of in line with the security must be job zero from Andy Jassy, right? And pertinent for everyone here, given we're at AWS and at reInvent. The way you said it was in line with this, right? If it's not done from the ground up, it's not job zero. If it's not on everyone's job description, it's not job zero. So that's a different way of saying it's job zero. And I think essentially for all of us, some of the things we are seeing as being and delivering best-in-class security to our customers, we're definitely seeing not just the volume and the number of attacks going up, but also the sophistication of those attacks. Things like, very sophisticated tools, Cobalt Strike, used for sophisticated penetration testing, getting leaked. Now, these kinds of sophisticated tools being available to less sophisticated malicious actors. Things like Revil, ransomware as a service. I'm like, wow, right? And Graboid for crypto mining. There's just more and more of these things that are causing, tremendous impact, and not in the right way for our customers. So essentially, that making it job zero is we're seeing that even at our customers' board level, the due diligence to kind of understand what their security threat is, what risk levels they have, is becoming more and more of a priority. Essentially, our customers having to be prepared for nation-state level attacks, and this is not being sensational or dramatizing things. This is actually what's happening, and security must be job zero, I think, is one way to look at it, ensuring that it's built in from the ground up and not glommed on later. These are the kinds of things that we're also hearing across the board from our customers. So it was good to hear your version of it and the strategy and the approach that Avalon uses. Okay, so I think we did this.
Yep, we went through it again.
Right. So just to give everyone a flavor of Palo Alto Networks, for those of you who aren't familiar with the breadth of our technologies, today I'll be talking about mostly our network security product portfolio, but we also have what we call Prisma Cloud and our SOC security. So Prisma Cloud is securing applications all the way through from code, when you code the application, build it, deploy it, run it in the cloud. So our Prisma Cloud product portfolio provides security for that entire life cycle. Our SOC security essentially automates incident response. So if and when there are incidents, the manual work required, the response time being shortened and so on, being delivered through those security services. Like I said, we'll focus a little bit more on our network security products, but essentially everything we do, we've spent a lot of time and energy integrating everything with AWS. So all these services, all our flagship products, you'll find can be leveraged on AWS. A little bit of history here for everyone to be aware. We've been engaged in partnering with AWS for many years. This is just a subset of our products that are integrated and available on AWS. For those of you familiar with Palo Alto Networks products, our VM series product, which is available on the marketplace, is one of the leading products across all categories on the AWS marketplace. We've also made available our CN series, which is for containerized environments. So you can also get CN series on the AWS marketplace. And we're noticing as customers are evolving their stacks, virtualized environments, moving to containerized environments, we are making those products available also on AWS. And then going from there, earlier this year in the March timeframe, we launched Cloud Next-Gen Firewall. That's what we've been partnering closely with the Avalon team on. This is essentially a managed service. So Palo Alto Networks manages the firewall and operates it on behalf of our customers, and our customers leverage it for securing their workloads on AWS. And back to you, Jesse, for your journey.
Appreciate it. All right, AWS. So the company founded in 2013. By 2015, we went into production. And part of that network segmentation and trying to isolate our workflows, we had one organizational unit or one AWS account, and we had 4 VPCs, basically dev, quality assurance, user acceptance test, and production. Actually, a couple of those were combined. We had a command and control environment and an end user environment. So these were all isolated VPCs, which, if you're not familiar with AWS, is like a data center. They had their own firewalls and had very similar firewall rules, but slightly nuanced for their environment. As we started to grow and get more customers and start developing new products, in 2017, we started developing the new tools as cloud native capabilities. And so when you start messing with the cloud native capabilities, we needed a separate organizational unit or a second AWS account, because we wanted to start isolating even the cloud level management. So when you start getting out of the EC2 server world and using more cloud native capabilities, sometimes your administration at the AWS level is at the entire account level. IAM roles will only do so much to isolate those capabilities. So by going to a different organizational unit, you can turn it over to a different a different part of your business unit or a different development group to administrate. So it gets more complicated. So now we start having multiple organizational units, multiple VPCs, 8 firewalls. Okay, so where this hyper network segmentation is a great idea, and we had a lot of benefits from it, now we start running into a lot of complexity to administer the built-in complexity that we had for isolating all of our networks and our workflows. So take it to the next level, and this is actually where the AWS Transient Gateway and Palo Alto's Cloud Next-Gen Firewall showed up at the absolute right time for us. Because you can see at this point, now I'm moving into 6 organizational units. All right, so we're really starting to develop a lot of cloud capabilities. We wanted to give our development team basically their entire, like a non-patient health information, non-PHI development environment. Now they can go and build all sorts of new tools, capabilities, and we can give them full control of the AWS account without having to worry about it, because our production workloads aren't in there. But again, that'd be another set of firewalls. Okay, by having the Cloud Next-Gen Firewall show up, we are now able to put those workloads behind a single pane of glass and a single firewall, right? Now I'm starting to keep my original vision of network segmentation, but my administrative workload drops significantly. It is because now I've got it all behind one firewall, with a library, a set of rules that can maintain that network segmentation across, organizational units, AWS accounts, because this is regionally based. So I can manage my entire AWS East region behind this next-gen firewall. Move on to our vision for next year. We want to be running hot across from east to west. US West 1 and US East 1. We're in East right now. Next year, we intend to be over in West because we have recently signed the Hawaii Health Plan. And for latency, they're out in the middle of the Pacific. If they got to come all the way to US East, we're talking 500 to 1,000 millisecond latency. And remember, I like to process my claims at 300 millisecond latency, because when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of claims, that time adds up. It may not seem like a lot, but it adds up. So by being able to move this workload over to US West, we can now run hot. Now, from a disaster recovery perspective, I already have a foothold over US West. It's hot. All my security is there. The same firewall rules. I can fail over from east to west or west to east, right? But you think about how I've segmented my environment. If I had to do that all with single firewalls at each level, the workload would be pretty much untenable for a small company of 200 employees. We just wouldn't be able to stick with that strategy. But having the single pane of glass, I'm going to have one for our US 1 East and one for US West. Now I'm managing two firewalls with that strategy across the entire environment.
All right. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. All right. So that's interesting right now. Jesse, you've just demonstrated and described how Avalon's been using the cloud. You're able to do a lot more, scale up, do multiple things with various regions, not have to have a very large team, so your resources are lower. You're able to move at the speed your business requires. So a lot of great things about the cloud. But there's also the aspect that all the threats that existed on-premise are not just relevant, but absolutely exist in the cloud as well. So when a question sometimes comes to me as to, the cloud's secure, right? Why do I need a next-gen firewall? There is a shared security aspect of the cloud, and essentially our customers have to protect themselves in the cloud. And why would you need a next-gen firewall in the cloud? For several reasons.
Yeah, I would say Amazon calls that the shared responsibility model. They'll handle a certain portion of it in the infrastructure, but the server configuration and the security and how you've structured your firewalls and how you've designed your environment, that's you.
And we categorize it in kind of three types of use cases. We talk about it in the context of outbound connections, essentially applications if they have to connect to the internet for any reason, to download a software patch or to connect to external APIs. You are exposed to the potential of malware being downloaded. And essentially, we'll use some examples and work through a case to describe that in a little more detail. But essentially, a next-gen firewall protects you from those situations, either blocking the connection, essentially not allowing the malware to be downloaded. In situations where you may have unpatched or unknown vulnerabilities, essentially being able to, buy the time to patch the vulnerabilities and or to protect yourself from those vulnerabilities by preventing those vulnerabilities from being exploited. Again, that's where a next-gen firewall comes into picture. And the third point is essentially preventing lateral movement. Essentially, if there is a compromised situation, you don't want to have that then move laterally and expand through your data center and through and reach other applications. So essentially protecting applications from applications with using a zero trust framework, just like you do it for internet connections, you also should be doing it for your application to application connectivity. So we'll walk through that a little bit, and I will use, the Log4j incident. I know everyone's heard about it. Sometimes I hear from customers, hey, we've heard this one before, right? But essentially, we found that when we dig into it a little deeper and we share what actually is what that incident was about, and why then what we call a layer 7 next-gen firewall actually would prevent and protect you had you had it in those situations, right? So if you look at this right now, the top line there, think of it as the outside world, the unprotected world, the untrusted world, and the green line at the bottom is your infrastructure, your servers, and that's what you want to protect from malicious actors, essentially, right? And if you think of the Log4j vulnerability, it essentially allowed for a malicious actor to run a command remotely by leveraging kind of a web header and using it to infiltrate, right? So essentially, in this particular example, we've said the attacker inserts a JNDI lookup in a header field. That's a Java naming directory interface. So essentially using that, through a sequence of things, what actually happens then is the server takes certain actions to reach out to untrusted external parties. The LDAP server in this particular case downloads an untrusted link, goes to that now untrusted server or untrusted website, and downloads some malicious software, in this case an untrusted Java class. Now once the server has run that code, it is compromised. Now for all practical purposes, there is this malicious actor externally, has full access to that server. Now that server is being used for crypto mining, or even worse, data being exfiltrated, and potential for having kind of this lateral movement. And now this malicious actor being able to get access to additional internal applications and servers. So this is what would have happened had there not been a next-gen firewall in the picture. Now in the next slide, I want to kind of share again, similarly, right? You have the outside agent and the server you want to protect. In this particular case, again, absolutely, this outside agent can do the same thing. But when they try to send this untrusted lookup to your server, essentially, we have threat prevention, which is part of our next-gen firewall products, where there are signatures. Within 24 hours of the Log4j vulnerability being discovered, we had already updated our signatures so that now we were able to block any Log4j attacks as well as any variations of it. So we kept updating them with variations so that our customers, we had actually one customer that told us there were over 5,500 exploit attempts within a week of the Log4j vulnerability being publicized. And there's no chance that they would have been able to update all their servers within a week of the vulnerability being discovered. So essentially, having that protected them. More so, though, even before the signatures are updated, we have machine learning and AI that is able to detect unknown, never seen before threats, and essentially be able to block those things even before they are known vulnerabilities. So those are things there. But then, as you go through the entire attack lifecycle, a next-gen firewall could protect you at every step of the way, right? So essentially, if that threat did come through, App ID can be used to block external traffic going to untrusted applications, untrusted URLs with our advanced URL filtering, and then we have things like threat prevention and App ID as well for protecting further down the attack lifecycle as well. So essentially, in this case, both the initial situation as well as any lateral movement can be protected with a next-gen firewall. But it's important to notice that this all requires deeper inspection, right? You have to be able to get down to the level of being able to identify the application, identify the actual workload, and so on, right? So this isn't something that security groups or an L3, L4 firewall could do for you. So essentially, that's the point to keep in mind, and that's why a next-gen firewall is required in the cloud. And these are the kinds of things we protect our customers from, both known, unknown, never seen before threats, essentially, with the next-gen firewall. And with that, I do want to kind of also have Jesse share with us his experience with the Log4j nightmare, as Jesse calls it.
Yeah, it was definitely a nightmare. Again, being a small company, we have a pretty tight development cycle, and we're doing a lot of implementations of new customers. And so to get derailed by, if you guys remember, I think there were 4 major CVE notifications over about a 2.5-month period. It just kept coming. I think 2 of them came out as critical. One was actually originally lowered back down to high. Another one came out as a medium high, and then another one as a low. But we had our customers, our health plans, that were calling us and saying, hey, what are you doing about Log4j? We're really worried about this. And so even our government entities, I mean, everyone was just spun up on it, and they wanted to know exactly what we did to respond to this in a timely fashion. So as you know, the CVE came out unannounced without a patch. They had a patch with, about 9 days later. So we had to get that patch applied really fast. We had to then run out, and then we got hit almost as soon as we got through with that patch cycle. The next CVE came out like 2 days later. And we're like, oh, again? And they turned that patch around, I think, a little quicker, 4 or 5 days. So it was actually a pretty good cycle time for a bug remediation, but you have days of a gap. So we had several of those items out there, and we also have our own Java code that used Log4j. So our own development team had their own response time that they had to get into our front-end portal and our claims processing engines and our automated rules engines and get them up to date. So it's a lot of work. And some of our third parties were still delayed. And I think the last one, we just got rid of the last Log4j in this last patch cycle, right, Eric? Yep. So what is that, 10, 11 months later? So mitigation becomes the issue, because being a regulated entity, I have to attest to my vulnerability management program to my health plans on a monthly basis. And I cannot run with criticals and highs unremediated in my environment. So now I have to go through this risk management exercise and say, okay, well, I still have some of these vulnerabilities in the environment because I can't just rip and replace. But now I move into a mitigation strategy. I start utilizing AWS web application firewalls and the Palo Alto's application filtering, as well as vulnerability management, as my mitigation strategy. All right? So we took credit for the mitigation steps and making sure that these signatures were both in the web application firewall and in the physical firewalls. If we could reduce the use of a particular application, we did. And by our design, we already keep a lot of the applications extracted from the internet. We put everything behind load balancers and autoscalers. And when we patch in a build and destroy method. So we're constantly updating, patching, and replacing either the servers or the containers in our deployment process. So the health plans accepted that mitigation strategy, even though we had to say, okay, we're marking these down to medium and low vulnerabilities. We're still tracking them. But we downgraded them from critical so that we could continue to operate with the health plans. And they signed off on this approach, right? And that allowed us to continue to operate in the healthcare space. So it was a big deal. And 10, 11 months later, we're still dealing with it. We're still answering questions. Our cyber liability insurance provider is asking questions about it. They're still calling us up and asking whether we've handled it or not. And so, partnering with Palo Alto Networks, remember, we had their physical firewalls, it's obviously virtual in AWS, but we run them ourselves. So we're very familiar with the Palo Alto approach, have a lot of faith and confidence in it. So as we move to needing a cloud firewall to handle the significant amount of isolated workloads that we had, we wanted to stick with Palo Alto Networks because we already had the knowledge, the trust, and it's one of the reasons why we stuck with Palo Alto through this next-gen firewall process, because we knew that they could help us mitigate these kind of vulnerabilities.
Thank you, Jesse. So as we've been working with all our customers, we do really appreciate the the tough time that security practitioners have, the complexity you have to deal with, so on and so forth. And essentially, as we build out our strategy, and I'll just go a little bit into the platform approach we have before I share a little bit more around our approach to our cloud next-gen firewall. Essentially, I mean, you're talking about it in the context of one product, sometimes in the case of your cloud environment, but then there are also oftentimes pretty complex scenarios for our customers where they have hardware firewalls on premise, they're working on, they have cloud next-gen firewalls or our VM series or our software firewalls in the cloud, and they have applications that they have to protect in the cloud. They have their end users who are in various branch offices and things like that. So essentially our goal is to help our customers secure their entire estate as simply and as consistently as possible, and essentially by leveraging this platform approach that we have developed to help our customers do exactly that. Essentially the bigger boxes there, the hardware firewalls, the software firewalls, SASE, we call them our form factors, or essentially the enforcement points. What do you need secured and where? And we bring it to you in a way that you can secure whatever you need, wherever you need it. And then all those security services, the boxes up there, whether it's intrusion prevention, URL filtering, threat prevention, data loss prevention, all of them can be applied consistently to all those enforcement points. So now you can use a consistent approach to protect all your users, your data, the applications, essentially helping to move towards that zero trust philosophy. I won't go into that. I think that could take it a whole discussion in and of itself, but essentially allowing for that least privileged access, continuous trust verification, continuous security inspection, and doing it consistently across the entire estate so that you can then have consistent security, essentially not have gaps in that security across your estate, and provide a consistent experience to all your users. So I will talk a little bit about Cloud Next-Gen Firewall for AWS. That is really the primary spotlight we want to have in our conversation today, and very much driven by essentially those two things that, Jesse, I think you talked about together. Oftentimes we see it as not necessarily coming together in every customer conversation and having two different sets of requirements, both equally important, where the network security folks absolutely value the best-in-class security, understand what a layer 7 firewall or a next-gen firewall can offer based on the points I made as I was sharing the Log4j incident anatomy. The ability to get that real-time protection, the fact that we can get those signatures updated and you're protected immediately and don't have to patch your vulnerabilities and so on, and the ML-powered aspect of it so that we can recognize unknown, never seen before threats. So those kinds of things being very high priority for the security, network security teams. But then there's also the cloud teams and the application teams who want this to be quick, fast, zero maintenance. I need to move. I need for it to be able to integrate well with the way I do things in the AWS world, right? And I want it to be scalable. I want it to have high availability, and I don't have to spend too much time and energy. I don't have too many resources, and I want to have both those things, right? So essentially, that's what drove us to bring Cloud Next-Gen Firewall to market. We've had it early. We launched, as I said, March of this year. We know other vendors are also starting to do it. It's a testament for this being needed in the cloud and for others seeing that the value, that providing the value is the right thing to do. So with that, we launched Next-Gen Firewall to do exactly those two things. Bring best-in-class security to our customers, prevent all known, unknown threats, and do it in a way that is cloud native and fits into the way our customers do things on AWS. So by delivering this, essentially we're bringing these kinds of best-in-class security features and functionality natively into your cloud experience in AWS. I talked about App ID, essentially being able to identify applications and to be able to write policy that can be done on an application-specific level, not what I call brute force method at a port or an IP address level. Threat prevention, which again is key to preventing the threats, preventing malware, preventing attackers from being able to compromise your systems, advanced URL filtering, all these being made available through Cloud Next-Gen Firewall. So I did want to also share a little bit about how we package this up and what's the shared responsibility here between our customers and us. So from an infrastructure management standpoint, Jesse, all the things you talked about as you're scaling up on AWS, your team doesn't have to scale up as you scale from the standpoint of operating and managing the infrastructure, so we take care of all of that, right? Any patches, any updated signatures, things like that happen automatically behind the scene. Our customers don't have to worry about it at all. Automatic scale, so as traffic goes up for our customers, the scale of the firewalls can match the traffic needs, and then ensuring that it's highly resilient. So all those things Palo Alto Networks takes care of, but we know that from the perspective of your security policies, that's absolutely things that our customers want to have full control over. What do they secure, how they secure it, what kinds of things they make accessible to whom, so on and so forth, all with our customers. And also, the one thing we need our customers to do is ensure that the traffic is routed through our endpoints so that we can then do that continuous security verification. There's a little asterisk you see on the AWS Firewall Manager. That essentially is an option. We've integrated well into the Firewall Manager so that you can leverage the visibility that AWS has into your entire estate and then be able to manage your firewalls comprehensively across your entire estate through AWS Firewall Manager. We were the first third party to integrate with AWS. Like I mentioned, we launched in March. There have been a couple others who have now launched similar products. Essentially, the point being next-gen firewalls are required in the cloud, and it does, we're seeing other validation of it in the market as well. A quick point here, because I didn't make it earlier, I did talk about the ease of setup, essentially deploying it, and things like that are things we've made easy for our customers through Cloud Next-Gen Firewall. I mentioned the zero maintenance as well, where the patches and the upgrades and the availability is all maintained by us. The scalable policy management I mentioned through AWS Firewall Manager. The piece I didn't mention, which comes up almost every time we talk to our customers, is the automation. Again, that's something we deeply appreciate that our customers require, whether it's Terraform scripts or whether it's Ansible, being able to have a completely API-driven approach so that you can build it into your CI/CD pipelines. All that is also available with Cloud Next-Gen Firewall. It's also available with our VM series and our other products, but we've continued to maintain that and ensure that our customers can do things and automate them in the way that you expect in the cloud. All right, I love this one, Jesse.
Yeah,
back to you on this one. This is why we do what we do. We want to see these outcomes for our customers so that they can get the scale they want, to do it without having to have massive teams, as well as allowing them to run their business. I think healthcare, all of us should appreciate both the responsibility you have for your customer data as well as their health, and the fact that we can help you secure all of it and do it actively across the large 40 million plus customer base you have is very exciting. So over to you.
So as you can imagine, having multiple firewalls has a lot of licensing costs, administration costs. One of the other things I had thought about while standing here was the cost of an EC2 server, and we have them in a cluster. And my utilization report says that my EC2 server is only running at like 3 or 4 or 5%. So okay, why do I have my firewall so overutilized? Well, remember that hyper network segmentation, the amount of VPCs that we've had to scale the EC2 firewall up to have enough network cards to handle the network. And so, like I said, right now, running my own firewall, it's completely underutilized. And so we're paying for a big piece of hardware, both in a cluster, the primary and the standby, so that it has enough network cards to handle the load. Actually, it's not the load. It's just the connection, just to handle the connection. So there's a big cost savings in moving to a managed cloud-based firewall and just reducing that licensing, the server cost, the administration efforts. The increased security manageability. My security engineer is really excited about this because instead of having to connect Splunk or his other tools off to 8 different firewalls, he can now just go into CloudWatch. quickly do a search. Doesn't even have to download anything at this point. Can do searches, investigations right in CloudWatch, a single pane of glass across all the environments. Yet for his Splunk correlation efforts, he can still connect to one data repository now instead of multiple endpoints. So a lot of efficiencies in that area. We've already mentioned the labor cost, the engineering, the staffing reduction. Or I should say, not reduction. We're already a small team. My staff isn't going to have to grow at the same rate, right? Because now, as my environment is growing, the administration is manageable with the team that I have. All right, we talked about the condensing the 8 firewalls into one, the complexity. So you can think about the rule management and the complexity of managing 8 different firewalls and keeping them in sync and alignment, the unique rules per environment, being able to have them in one pane of glass has where you can quickly compare environmental rules side by side in one location. And I talked about our multi-region strategy. So instead of going to 8 to 16 to however many kind of firewalls, when I'm multi-region, only running 2 firewalls, that is going to be fantastic. So that'll allow us to go hot, allow us to grow, scale, have dynamic failover capabilities. And as already been mentioned, it can be managed through CloudFormation or Terraform. So we can keep the 2 firewalls in sync. Matter of fact, I think you guys told me you're going to have it integrated with my Panorama by January. So I'll have a panorama view of my various tools, and then once we go to the second Cloud NGFW, to be able to monitor it and see it, the environment from one pane of glass, that speaks through itself. So those are the kind of benefits and results that a small 200-person company is seeing from utilizing Palo Alto's next-gen firewall in the cloud.
Thank you. All right, I see we have maybe 12 to 15 minutes to go, so I will just wrap up briefly, recap some of the things I shared before. We're bringing together this best-in-class security. It's cloud integrated, automated, so that you can use your infrastructure as code and security as code approaches, and it's easy to manage so that you don't have to have spend time and energy on actually managing it and can focus on doing the things that are higher value for your business. And with that, I just want to share that we have a really tremendous amount of security that we're offering to the industry. We have over 200 researchers who are really keeping up to date with every single new incident, new security vulnerability, ensuring that those signatures make their way back into the product. 4.3 million unique security updates a day and 224 billion threats blocked every day. I feel immensely proud when I see this, and I just want you to be aware that with Palo Alto Networks, you have a really solid partner when it comes to your security.
And I would jump in and add to that. As a small company, obviously I don't have a big threat intel type presence in my own company. The majority of my approach has been to safe list all connections. And really proactively manage the good is what I call it. That minimum necessary, it can only talk to what it's allowed to talk, have safe list type of connectivity. But when a threat hits, like a Log4j, I rely on your ability to manage that threat intel for me and make sure that those signatures or that protection's in place, because I'm not doing that myself.
Exactly right, and those threat researchers are exactly the folks who help us get it. Like I mentioned with Log4j, within 24 hours, our product had it, and all our customers were secured from that particular one. And just like that, there are so many others, and that's the over 4 million threat updates that we do on a daily basis. So thank you so much, Jesse. Really appreciate the time and your partnership, and looking forward to continuing the journey together. And thank you, everyone.